Mark Steyn is a great Canadian columnist, author, and all-around troublemaker. Put on your seatbelts, folks, because we've got him for an exclusive interview tonight on The Source. Mark Steyn is one of Canada's greatest freedom fighters. Most of the time he fights for freedom the same way I do. He writes, he talks, he goes on the radio, he makes arguments, but he does it much bigger and much better than almost anyone else. But it's not just his commercial and rating successes that makes Mark Steyn so important, it's what he says that makes him a hero. He's been sounding the alarm bell about the decline of our Western civilization for years, especially after 9/11. His last best-selling book, America Alone, was about how much of the free world has just given up culturally and demographically. Western countries just don't have the will to fight for themselves anymore. They don't even have the will to have babies anymore. The West is wasting away, except for America, he said. When Maclean's magazine excerpted from that book, America Alone, an extremist group here in Canada called the Canadian Islamic Congress complained about it to the Human Rights Commissions. Well, not one, but three of them, actually. They wanted the government to stop Mark Steyn from talking about the threat posed by radical Islam. Now, no real court would have heard such a lawsuit, but the kangaroo courts put his ideas on trial at the BC Human Rights Tribunal for 5 full days. It was a farce. It was a sham. It was something better suited to the former Soviet Union or a Saturday Night Live skit. And it was happening here in Canada. Now, Steyn and Maclean's had to pay $250,000 in legal fees. He was acquitted, but he didn't get a dime of their money back from the Canadian Islamic Congress censors who brought the nuisance suit. Well, on Monday, Mark's new book comes out. It's called After America, Get Ready for Armageddon. As you can see, it's a bit more pessimistic than the last one, which was called America Alone. Now, a couple days ago, I met with Mark for an hour in Montreal to talk about his book and much more. It's his first interview granted to a Canadian media outlet for his new book tour. I hope you enjoy it. I'll be back after the interview to do a dramatic reading from the book itself. That's all ahead on The Source.
Since hanging out with you, I discovered that, in fact, I've been pushed way out to the furthest, extremist, crazy, wacko fringe of things.
The Source is brought to you by Crestview. Government relations, public opinion research, campaigns. Crestview, opinionchanges.ca.
Ask me what it's like to get your best night's sleep every night.
Why not talk to someone who's sleeping on the most highly recommended bed in America?
Ask me about my Tempur-Pedic.
Ask me how fast I fall asleep.
Ask me about staying asleep.
Tempur-Pedic owners are more satisfied than owners of any traditional mattress brand.
Ask me why someone who's never had an ache or a pain is in love with this bed.
Tempur-Pedic, the most highly recommended bed in America.
Available at The Brick, Sears, Sleep Country Canada, and other fine retailers.
When whippoorwills call and evening is nigh, I hurry to my blue heaven. Just a turn to the right, you find a little white light.
The new sandals, Emerald Bay, Great Exuma, Bahamas. Now get a $350 airfare credit plus save up to 65%. Call 1-800-545-8283.
We've all been there at Saturday morning and you're face-to-face with the list. The honey-do list. All the really tough jobs. But with CLR, it's easy to cut the list down to size. Start in the bathroom with that gunked-up shower head. Give it a quick dip in some CLR and see how strong it can really run. CLR is great for the washer and dishwasher, too. Just pour in a cup and run a quick cycle to keep them both running clean and trouble-free. Same thing with a coffee maker for its best-tasting brew. Use CLR to clean your tools and make them shine. And CLR is safe for the environment. Outside, dingy, dirty siding and tough rust stains on concrete are no match for CLR's brute cleaning power. And nothing is faster for dissolving built-up calcium and lime deposits. If it's on your list, CLR has what you need to make fast work of any cleaning job around your house.
At Canadian Tire, Home Hardware, Superstores, Loblaws, Rona, Zellers, Safeway, Shoppers, Co-op, Pro-Ace, True Value, V&S, London Drugs, Home Depot.
Bonjour and welcome to Montreal. This is not my normal habitat. I'm in Canada's second city to interview Mark Steyn, who has schlepped up here from New Hampshire. Mark, thanks for joining us here on The Source.
Salut mon vieux, bienvenue au Québec.
Hang on a second, I got to look that up. You know what, the only word I know in French is the word menu. But that's gotten me
That's
through a
good,
lot.
that'll get you a long way in this town.
Mark, I know you as a friend in the free speech battles, as a columnist, as a guest host on the Rush Limbaugh show. How would you describe yourself?
Well, I used to think I was a very mainstream, moderate, centrist kind of guy, and since hanging out with you I discovered that in fact I've been pushed way out to the furthest extremist crazy wacko fringe of things, but I still think of myself essentially as someone who's rooted in the classic tradition of English liberties in the world.
Well, I was out in Vancouver a couple of years ago when you had your 5-day trial at the hands of the British Columbia Human Rights Tribunal. I thought it was a shocking kangaroo court. The Vancouver Sun said that that tribunal murdered its reputation that day, but they're still operating. Tell me, before we got a lot to talk about today. We're going to take the whole show today. We're going to talk about your new book, but I just want you to follow up on that disgraceful day in Canadian kangaroo court jurisprudence. We're a few years on now, but you still had to go through a 5-day trial. What do you have to say about the state of freedom?
Well, it was fascinating to me because I think the day I arrived in Vancouver, they devoted most of that day to a discussion of, quote, the tone of my jokes. Now, if anyone was going to do that, you'd think it would be, you know, page 73, foot of the page in the Literary Review of Canada, that some abstruse critic with time on his hands might want to do that. The idea of flying in so-called expert witnesses from Toronto and Philadelphia to discuss the tone of my jokes, I didn't mind because you and I had a lot of fun with this thing because we were in a position to. But there's people whose lives are destroyed by these horrible tribunals. And there's countries that do criminalize jokes. When the Reverend Canaan Banana was the head of state of Zimbabwe, the Zimbabwean parliament passed the law forbidding people to make jokes about the Reverend Canaan Banana's names. And subsequently he was put on trial by Robert Mugabe for seducing the majority of the Zimbabwe government football team, soccer team. And the real headlines were Banana accused of sodomy, and then when he fled to South Africa, I think the headline in the Daily Telegraph in London was hand over Banana, Mandela told. So by that time he passed beyond the protections of the law making it illegal to make jokes about his name. But that's the point. Free societies do not criminalize jokes. And the fact that we were in a normal-looking courtroom, you know, with the royal coat of arms above those 3 phony, pseudo, pathetic, non-jurist, fake judges, but with the royal coat of arms saying this is exactly the same as any trial going back 8 centuries to Magna Carta. It was a travesty. Free societies do not criminalize jokes.
Listen, you've been pounding away at that. I have in my own way. We've had lots of friendly words from editorial writers, from even the Toronto Star and at the CBC. But here we are, 5 years after I was first charged with a human rights offense, about the same for you, and the law remains on the book. These human rights commissions remain in force. That chief kangaroo who's in charge of your trial, she just got appointed to the bench as a real judge in BC. Have we made any progress at all?
Oh, I think we have. I think that law is unenforceable. Section 13 is unenforceable. Right at the end of my book, I quote a line from Milton Friedman, which I think is the key to all these issues. Milton Friedman says, don't wait to elect the right people to do the right things. Create a climate of opinion where the wrong people are forced to do the right things, where the squishiest, finger-in-the-windy, jelly-spine politician has to do the right things, because in the broader culture, you have made that the rational choice for the gutless jelly spine squish. And I think we're actually a long way to doing that with Section 13 and the Human Rights Code. None of those guys. So what? She's been promoted. Jennifer Lynch has got her, whatever it is, the Queen's Jubilee Medal. You're not going to get one of those. I'm not going to get one. I don't even know what it is. But I don't see why she should have one. She's got all those. She gets the toys. She'll get the Order of Canada. She'll get all that stuff. But she will not want to tangle with us again. And I think that's the lesson.
Okay, well, you said Jennifer Lynch, that's the Chief Commissioner of the
Canadian Human Rights.
But here's my question for you. If she won't go after folks like you and me because we've got news magazines and TV stations behind us, what about going after severely normal people who don't have, like Maclean's magazine for whom you worked? I understand they paid about $250,000 in legal fees. They had some high-priced legal help. I was able to scrounge together some dough and some help. But most of the people targeted by these human rights commissions are ordinary schlubs.
Right.
Isn't all that's changed, Mark, is they won't go after noisy guys like us, but they'll keep picking on people who don't have political or media connections?
No, I think they're worried that you know, a case comes up and it attracts your attention on shows like this, or it attracts my attention, and then they're back to that situation. I think they're actually very reluctant to tiptoe too far into the speech police enforcement. You have to, vigilance is of the essence here, because it always is about any kind of liberty issue. We are up against a vast state apparatus, not just in Canada, but throughout the Western world, that thinks it is now entirely normal to regulate the opinions of the citizenry. That is a disgusting and obnoxious notion, and it has to be resisted every step along the way.
Folks, we're talking to Mark Steyn, one of my favorite writers. He's got a new book out. It's called After America, his follow-up to America Alone. He's with us for the whole show today. We're going to take a short break, but when we come back, there's so much more I want to talk to Mark about, ranging from the terror murders in Oslo, Norway, to the debt default deals in the United States. You don't want to miss a word of it. It's all ahead on Source.
It's the problem with our culture today. We have a kind of conformist mentality throughout the Western world, elites throughout the Western world. It's a strange thing to me that the more they talk about celebrate diversity, the more they're actually enforcers of ruthless homogeneity.
Let us be heard.
My opinion matters. Freedom isn't free.
Canada is a great country.
I'm taxed to death. We face real challenges.
Let's get on with it.
Be fearless. Move forward.
Finally, a station for all of us.
We're on your side. Sun News Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Ho. I got something you don't want to miss. My new Air Orthotics. Look at this. Isn't this cool? Something you've never seen. Reversible. On this side, we got 110. Not 100, but 110 mini air cones. Every time you step down, oh, you're going to love this. Little jets of air come shooting up, and your feet going to feel cool and a little less odor. That always helps. Now, if you got foot pain, heel spur, plantar fasciitis, bunions, or just tired feet, you're gonna love this because this absorbs the shock, and I put in this special design honeycomb plate. It is anti-shocking. Every time you step down, less shock to your feet, less shock to your knee, hip, and especially low back. If you got back pain, foot pain, you got to use this. When I put this in, woo, baby, I love it. It feels good.
Love them. I would love to have them in every one of my shoes.
Some of you have extra high arches. This will fit, not like the old style where it's very rigid and your bones all locked up. No, no, no. This is flexible, baby. Flexible, okay? When you step on, it's self-forming. It supports you, allow you to move. If you have extra high arch, again, you'll form to your feet. Listen, don't use those old style ones that kind of fix your foot. This absorbs your shock, keep your feet nice and cool. It's anti-shocking, and it got little jet cones. Not only that, you're gonna love this. How many of you love a foot massage any day? You're gonna try this, even without your shoes. It's reversible, look at it. I step on, oh, the best foot massage back there. It's like kneading and squeezing, hitting all those reflexology points. It just get all the energy flowing. I love it, try it, you will love it too.
Get Dr. Ho's Air Orthotics for half off the regular price of $40. Call now and you'll get Dr. Ho's Air Orthotics for only $19.99. That's 50% off just for ordering today. Plus, order today and we'll also include a free reflexology foot chart. Don't wait. If you have back pain, knee pain, or foot pain, you will love these. This is an incredible offer, so call now.
Hey, welcome back to The Source. I'm Ezra Levant, talking with Mark Steyn, author of a new book called After America. We were just having a good talk, Mark, about political correctness and censorship. In the book, you use a phrase, conformocrats.
Right.
And I use the phrase consensus media, people who all agree on things, but it's much bigger than the media, isn't it?
No, I think generally it's the problem with our culture today. We have a kind of conformist mentality throughout the Western world, elites throughout the Western world. It's a strange thing to me that the more they talk about celebrate diversity, the more they're actually enforcers of ruthless homogeneity. If you notice, I love the way the New York Times, for example, recruits its journalists, but it goes to every minority journalism convention. It will go to the Hispanic Journalists Convention, the Gay Journalists Convention. It recruits for diversity of race, diversity of gender, diversity of orientation, for every diversity that matters, every diversity except the one that matters, which is, you know, diversity of thought. And I think this terrible closed conformity that Western elites live in these days, which is the whole purpose of further education. Further education, university, is not designed to encourage you to look with an inquiring mind at the world. It's to give you the right attitudes to permit you to join the conformist elite.
You know, it's funny because one of the things that these conformists think so highly of themselves is their open-mindedness. It's my experience that that no one is as hostile or enraged to a dissenting point of view than someone from this conformist, open-minded group. I mean, look at how they treat Sarah Palin.
Right.
She's not from this cultural stratum. She went to a no-name college, several of them. She didn't marry a famous or rich person. She grew up in a no-name town, in a no-name state. And I mean, there are legitimate grounds to criticize her, but the rage against her was something else. What is the roots of that rage?
Well, I think that's actually a pure class thing, a pure snobbish thing. You know, she has the kind of educational background that would not be unusual for American presidents before the 1980s. Ronald Reagan, for example, went to Eureka College in Illinois. A lot of Lincoln had 18 months of formal education. That's it. He was a pretty good president. He didn't go to Harvard. He didn't go to Yale. We now have ruled by south of the border by basically the Ivy League. Obama's administration is the most Harvard-Yale credentialed of any administration. Obama himself is a man who I think sums up the sheer pointlessness of this education. He had $1 million worth of education. He went to Occidental, then he went to Columbia, then he went to Harvard Law. He had $1 million worth of education, has never expressed an original thought in his life. Had he not become president through some bizarre quirk of circumstance, nobody would have thought that having $1 million worth of education to become a community organizer in Chicago was any kind of return on investment.
But it's not even the over-credentialization that you talk about in the book. It's what the hell has he actually done? Not just him, but Tim Geithner, this magician who was supposed to fix the economy, and all these gurus and the brains trust. None of them actually have ever done a bloody thing.
No, and I think that's actually a big problem. This idea that we venerate people who sit around. Now, you and I make a lot of money at sitting around.
But it's true. We don't actually do anything. I mean, I'm not trying to run a country. I'm just trying to have fun and talk about things.
Exactly. I wouldn't pretend to executive experience. But one thing I always tell whenever anyone asks me for advice on writing, my whole shtick with them is always to say, don't just write there, do something. It doesn't really matter what it is. If you want to raise sled dogs, raise sled dogs. If you want to tap dance, tap dance. But do something. Acquire a skill that requires preferably something that requires you to use your hands and engage in physical activity, because otherwise you become this kind of part of this desiccated elite in which language becomes metaphorical, divorced from real meaning, and is exactly like what I think is the big problem in the world today, a kind of faculty lounge mentality running the United States and most of the rest of the Western world.
We're backing into a lot of subjects in your book. Let's just start from the beginning. You wrote this book called After America. I read your last book, America Alone, and if I can sum up the thesis, it was America was the last productive, confident, exceptionalist country that also had a birth rate.
Right.
And your book After America can't be anything but a revision to that thesis. After America implies America is ending, am I right?
Well, I think it's an extension. Basically, I said that the thesis of America Alone is that most of the rest of the Western world, apart from the United States, is headed for collapse. My book was so influential that the United States basically signed on for the same program, supersized, and that is something that is ought to be extremely worrying to all of us. I mean, when I kind of move around now, I ask myself, you know, what's holding the joint up? All the assumptions we make about the world that we have lived in since 1945, that the peace and prosperity that the Western world has known since 1945, which is historically unprecedented, is it a permanent feature of life, as many people seem to assume, particularly people born in the 80s and 90s whose memories of even the Cold War are non-existent? Or is it the result of a very particular set of conditions that we are now jeopardizing and undermining? As I said, that's the basic question. What's holding the joint up?
Yeah. You know what, when I was growing up, when I was really young under Trudeau and later, I felt that Canada was an unserious country. Unserious economically because America paid for our defenses. Right. Unserious in terms of foreign policy because, you know, really, how much different would it make if Pierre Trudeau hung out with Castro? It was just poking America in the nose. America was the grown-up. America was the serious country. They could make the serious decisions and we could play around. Now I feel the shoe's on the other foot. Canada has the more sober-minded foreign policy, the more muscular foreign policy, the more robust economy. Our banks didn't fail. We're getting our deficit down, taxes down. I don't know what to make of it. If Canada is stronger and more grown-up than America, it should make me feel great, but actually it makes me feel terrified if we're it.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, Canada didn't do a lot of the really stupid things like wreck the banking system and the property market the way the United States did. I love one of the things I love about a friend of mine said to me the other day down in New York, what happened to like all the bank names, like the First National Bank of Dead Skunk Junction, and now all the banks are just initials. I said, well, you know why that is, don't you? And she said, no. I go, it's because they're all Canadian. What do you think TD, America's Neighborhood Bank, as its slogan is, what do you think TD stands for? She goes, yeah, gee, I don't know. And as you know, it's Toronto Dominion, but you can't use those words when you're taking all over the banking system in the United States. The United States, and I think that's actually the point here, that it's easier for Sweden to be Sweden than for the United States to be Sweden.
Because at the end of the day, Sweden knew America was there.
Yeah, and same way with Canada. And I think you're right that Canada, at a certain level, all the indicators are much sounder than America's at the moment. And again, I said to someone that if they ever do build a maple curtain on the 49th parallel, it will be to keep the Americans out because of societal collapse south of the border. But that's the problem, is that if Iceland collapses, if Greece collapses, most of the rest of us who aren't Icelandic or Greek can get along. When the United States goes belly up, it's going to drag down Canada and Britain and Australia and Western Europe with it, and that is the threat.
We'll talk more about that threat after the break. I'm Ezra Levant, talking with Mark Steyn, author of After America. It's a hell of a book. See you in a minute.
I think the danger we face is not the replacement of the American world order with a Chinese world order, but it's a world without order, where the Chinese and the Russians and the new caliphate emerging from the Middle East gobble up what they can.
A man with an opinion, a no BS, tell it like it is kind of guy. National editorial writer Mark Bonikoski. He's on your side, only on Sun News Network.
500 miles from nowhere, on the water or on the beach, you can now have an ice-cold drink or warm burger with your Coolatron Companion Portable Refrigerator Warmer.
This is solid-state thermoelectric NASA space technology brought down to Earth by Coolatron. Proudly Canadian, Coolatron is the only company building thermoelectric portable refrigerators in Canada for over 30 years. Lightweight and portable, so easy to use. Just plug it into your vehicle's 12-volt outlet and voila! You've got cold storage without ice. Built tough to survive under rugged conditions, Coolatron Companion delivers a cooling power of a 10-pound block of ice, never melts, and is always cold. Stop using those old coolers full of ice and water. A must-have on a family vacation or on a road trip, a motel stop at night, on the golf course, in your office, workplace, almost anywhere. Put your groceries directly in your Coolatron Companion. No need to make that extra trip back home. Keep your medicine cool on the road or even at home. Your Coolatron Companion even doubles as a warmer. A simple flip of the cord will change it to warming mode. Keep a home-cooked meal, lasagna, roast, or casserole hot as you travel to a potluck dinner. Or pick up your favorite takeout and keep it warm on the way back home. Open the easy access lid to grab a quick beverage, or open both doors to arrange and access all the food items you want. We promise your Coolatron Companion will pay for itself in just one road trip and continue saving you money for years to come. If you are not completely satisfied with your purchase, please return it to us within 30 days and get a full refund of the purchase price. That's our unconditional guarantee to you. This very special and exclusive television offer, we will also include this 110-volt power adapter absolutely free. The Coolatron Companion refrigerator warmer, the 10-foot cord, 2 shelves, and the 110-volt power adapter. This complete package, more than a $200 value at an incredibly low price. Just 4 easy payments of $39.95. Don't delay. Call the toll-free number on your screen right now and order your Coolatron refrigerator warmer.
Insist on the original and ask for it by name.
Welcome back to The Source, our exclusive show-long interview with Mark Steyn. Mark, in your book, After America, it's so meaty you can't even skim it. There's things on every page, but there's some major themes that stick out. One is America doesn't really build things anymore. It doesn't really do things. A lot of paper shuffling around, lots of credit card borrowing, and you make the case that it's just not sustainable. What do you think about this debt default discussion in Washington these days?
Well, it's not the default. I mean, this is what's insane about the last month's meaningless mumbo jumbo. It's the debt ceiling question. The issue isn't the ceiling; it's the debt.
Yeah.
When you've got $15 trillion of debt, and again, that's why the situation the United States is in is not the same as Canada or Portugal or Greece, or it's simply because of the huge numbers. People can do all these comparisons, you know, debt to GDP ratio and debt per capita, but actually the hard dollar sum, $15 trillion, American government spending assumes that the rest of the planet will be willing to sink 20% of its entire GDP into US Treasury debt, effectively indefinitely. The rest of the planet isn't going to do that. It's not just that the government of the United States is outspending America, it's outspending the planet. And you made the point with Canada and Europe that after the Second World War, America basically absolved the rest of the West from responsibility for its own defense. So it sucked up. In effect, American taxpayers pay for the German healthcare system, because by absolving Germany of the need to have an army, Germany can spend that money on healthcare, and it still isn't enough. It still isn't enough. So I think we're looking at, and I think that goes for Canada too. Canada has a small, a brilliantly skilled and incredibly brave armed forces. When you think of the Princess Patricia's snipers that the Pentagon wanted to give the Silver Star to in the Afghan campaign, and the Chrétien government sort of mothballed it because they didn't want it getting out that the Canadian military still killed people. Well, they do, and brilliantly. But they're a small elite military, and you know and I know that the reality is that continental defense, the first line of continental defense, is the US military. If the US turns into a large Portugal, what do you think that's going to do for continental defense?
You know, I came across a statistic the other day that every bit of gold ever mined in the history of man, it's 20 meter by 20 meter block, it's worth only about $7 trillion, $8 trillion, and which is about as much as Obama is going to rack up the debt in about another year's time. I mean, he spent And it's not just him, though.
No.
It's and let me say, in your book, you quote Dennis Prager, who says the problem isn't Obama. Obama didn't just declare himself president. What kind of a country voted for him, and did they buy a pig in a poke? Were they buying something else? Are Americans, if the election were held today, I see polls all the time, maybe a generic Republican would beat him. I'm skeptical. Do you think Obama would be elected again today now that people know what he's like?
Well, generic Republican is always the perfect.
That's my favorite Republican.
Yeah, generic Republican. But the minute generic Republican gets the nomination, generic Republican turns into Sarah Palin. The media jump on them, and the media demonize them. And again, I think this is the U.S. election campaign is going to be the most bloody and brutal in American history. I mean, I think it's going to be incredibly vicious, because I think of the investment that the media have in an essentially fraudulent figure. This man who ran on these absurd bumper sticker platitudes about hope
Hallmark
and change.
candidate. He was reading Hallmark cards.
Yeah, exactly. All this sort of generic abstract nouns, the generic gaseous uplift, audacity of hope, and all the rest of it. These are tough times. I mean, these are really tough times. I mean, we are jeopardizing the future of the civilization that built the modern world. The IMF says that China will be the dominant economic power by 2016. In other words, we are coming to the end of a 2-century period of Anglophone dominance. Canada is the perfect illustration of this. Canada, for most of its history, was oriented toward London. As Britain's power faded after the Second World War, Canada began to think, well, it matters more to get a favorable hearing in Washington than it does in London. So Canada but that's like the merest tweak. You're going from one Anglophone power to its prodigal son. That's the smoothest transition of global dominance in world history. To think it's going to go that way round when China becomes the dominant economic power is cloud cuckoo land stuff.
Well, and that's the thing. If America, I mean, I don't know if America is going to collapse in a cloud of dust, but we can see it slowing down. Unemployment is sticking above 9%. That's European. You know, growth is low. The military strength is just atrophying. So it's more whimpering. But avoid is being nature abhors a vacuum. What will fill that vacuum? Will we be seeing a Chinese aircraft carrier in the Persian Gulf? Will Russia take liberties? Will we see nuclear powers pop up around Arabia? What will the world look like if America continues its decline?
Well, I think you will see Chinese carriers in the Persian Gulf. I mean, it's fascinating to me. America is an anomaly. It's a non-imperial superpower. An historical anomaly. So if you look, and I mentioned earlier that Britannia's lion cubs had reoriented themselves toward Washington in recent years. But there's a whole other story there, that if you look at the way the Chinese are building ports in Burma, in Bangladesh, in Sri Lanka, these are all outposts of Britain's Indian Empire. The Chinese, they've swallowed up resources in Africa. As you well know, they're big investors in all kinds of resource companies in your province of Alberta. They bought a ton of bauxite in Jamaica. They're establishing the global network they need. You mentioned the Russians and the Saudis and all the others. I think the danger we face is not the replacement of the American world order with a Chinese world order, but it's a world without order, where the Chinese and the Russians and the new caliphate emerging from the Middle East gobble up what they can, and Western power retreats to a sort of few citadels, beleaguered citadels, that it defends as best it can.
It's terrifying. I read the book, and I'm an optimistic guy. I'm finding it hard to stay optimistic. Folks, we're talking to Mark Steyn, author of After America. Oh, it's hilarious, but it's also terrifying. We're going to talk more with Mark after the break.
I think Europe is in the state it's in because it has too narrow a public discourse.
He's worked around the world on both sides of the border, getting you the facts. Alex Mihailovich, only on Sun News Network.
This is an important announcement to all residents of Canada. If you owe at least $10,000 in credit card debt and you are struggling to make your minimum payments, Cambridge Life Solutions is now offering a consumer relief program that can help you reduce that amount up to 50%. If you qualify for this program, you may see a reduction in your monthly payments, and also will be settling your credit card debt for pennies on the dollar, which allows you to pay off your debts in just a fraction of the time it would normally take to pay off your credit cards. So call the experts at Cambridge Life Solutions for a free, no-obligation consultation over the phone to see if you qualify. Don't wait to get buried with insane interest payments or late fees. Make the free call to Cambridge Life Solutions and let them try to help you get out of your debt for a fraction of what you owe. Call the number on the screen or else log on to www.cambridgels.ca. Call now to settle that debt.
I'm Colin Mockery, and usually I need your laughs. But there's nothing funny about child poverty. Through World Vision Child Sponsorship, you can help provide access to clean water, nutrition, education, and health care. Please, call the number below or go online and sponsor a child right now.
There's magic up on the mountain high. Buckle up your seats, you're heading to the sky. It'll blast you up, then blast you down. You'll laugh and scream until you touch the ground. Come on, scream as loud as you can. Everyone loves Marine Land. Yeah, yeah. You're gonna love the skyscraper. Yeah, yeah. You'll want to ride it over again. Everyone loves Marine Land.
2012. The race for the White House is already heating up, with candidates rising and falling by the day. Will the president stay on course for 4 more years, or will the showdown next November mean a change in January? Sun News, Canadian home for the 2012 election campaign.
Welcome back. We're talking with our favorite author, columnist, troublemaker, and human rights criminal, just like me, by the way, Mark Steyn, who joins us from our Montreal temporary studio. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure, Ezra.
Listen, I want to shift gears, to something that I'm still trying to figure out. I'm talking about Anders Breivik, this mass murderer. I think I'd call him a terrorist. I read his 1,500-page manifesto. At first I was calling him crazy, but I don't think he's so much crazy, it's just evil. What are your thoughts on that and the media response to it?
Well, you know, I think he is evil, and I think it is an act of terror. He wanted to strike at the governing party of Norway, and we are obliged to regard that, I think, as an act of terrorism. He killed innocent civilians in large numbers. He's an evil man. He is a terrorist. He issued a large manifesto that has obsessed a lot of the, particularly in Canada, a lot of the commentary, not so much in Norway itself, interestingly enough, where the rather lethargic police response is weighing more heavily on their minds. He issued this manifesto that I'm cited in there, so is certain other people who've written on the present state of Europe, but so is Thomas Jefferson, Mahatma Gandhi, Winston Churchill. If you're going to start censoring everyone who's mentioned in that report, it's going to be a very long list. Mark Twain, Hans Christian Andersen. I'm not even the most eminent Canadian cited in there. Naomi Klein, he's a Naomi Klein reader, which I've never managed to do. What's more interesting to me is to say, accept everything that the critics say, that let's say that's correct, that somehow reading all these people, reading Mark Steyn and Naomi Klein and Mahatma Gandhi and Charles Darwin drove him to do this. If so, what then? What do you want to do? Do you want to censor? Do you want to censor that? Do you want the state to control people's access to that? I think Europe is in the state it's in because it has too narrow a public discourse. I wrote a big cover story for Maclean's a couple of years ago that our pal Paul Wells criticized, in which I talked about the resurgence of neo-nationalism and fascism in Europe, which is partly a response to the insane, crazy, control freak state, the Human Rights Commission mentality, trying to say, no, this is the level of polite conversation. And if you talk within these boundaries, you can be admitted to the party and you can have tea and cakes and sit around with the nice people. But if you want to raise other subjects, you're going to be pushed out and you're going to have to look elsewhere. Well, people are looking elsewhere.
You know what, I think they're pushing out an increasingly large fraction of society. I mean, they tried to criminalize Geert Wilders, who leads the third largest party in Holland.
Exactly.
And most of the people they push out are going to be normal guys who'll just grumble about it. But once in a while, I think you're going to push people out, and instead of having a safety valve of expression, they might turn to violence.
No, I think that's true. I mean, I love this phrase extremist. I mean, the phrase right-wing now actually is just applied basically by organizations like the CBC and the BBC in Britain and Le Monde in France, is just basically applied to anyone who doesn't quite fit into categories that they don't understand. So Ayaan Hirsi Ali, for example, is now put with the right-wing cranks, even though she's a black feminist. You know, all a black feminist has to do to get lumped in with the right-wing crazies is just, you know, just move off the reservation ever so slightly. Geert Wilders, his whole thing is he wants to save the gay moment in Amsterdam. Amsterdam's undergoing an epidemic of gay bashing. You know, imagine if we're in Montreal, it's got Le Village Gay here. I don't know whether have you spent time in the gay village?
Not enough, I guess.
You're secure enough in your sexuality.
Sure, we'll hang out afterwards.
They have in the summer. They've got like the cute little gay village cops in their like little buttock-hugging tight shorts, strolling arm in arm. Imagine if there was an epidemic of gay bashing in the gay village in Montreal. That's what's happening in Amsterdam. In other words,
those would all be right-wing gays if they complain about being beat up.
Exactly. And that's the same with Geert Wilders. He wants to, you know, and as you say, he's the third largest political party in the Netherlands. If you look at the polls, how can you be? By the way, and I'd love. If anyone from the CBC or the BBC or those kinds of guys are watching this, I'd love an explanation on that. How can you be a so-called fringe extremist but command more support than the mainstream? Doesn't that actually suggest that the complacent BBC, CBC twit is in fact looking at it only through the blinkers of his own perspective?
You know what, I use a phrase, I didn't coin it, others have, the media party. I put it to you and to everyone that the most powerful party in Canada and the United States is not the Republicans or Democrats or conservative liberals, but the media, which shapes your outside or your inside. You're too far, you're free. And I think the CBC is increasingly the most active underminer of our country. I don't say that just because I work for a competitor. I said that long before I joined the Sun. What do you think moving into an era, I mean, I see clashing forces. On the one hand, technology makes it harder than ever to censor, harder than ever to stop an idea. On the other hand, we have this impulse from governments and the Jennifer Lynches in the world to censor. Who's going to win that fight, and what should happen to an organization like the CBC?
Well, you see, I think that's very interesting. I think this is actually about control now. I think this is why people like Commissar Lynch of the Canadian Human Rights Commission, these people are panting for control of the internet, because they actually, it's critical of them to preserve their role as the gatekeepers who frame the discussion. What has happened in Europe, for example, I think I think, for example, you know, one of the biggest stories in post-war Europe is the demographic transformation of Europe. I don't see why you should not be able to discuss that. And I think if the elites say, no, sorry, we're placing that beyond discussion, what they're doing is actually confirming the darkest fears of people like Geert Wilders, that in fact the elites have not obtained the consent of the governed for the vast transformations they've set in motion, and that all they can do to hold the line on that is to actually prevent the real story getting out. I think that's disgraceful. I'm happy. I have no fear. You and I have had run-ins with all kinds of fellas. You know, you remember that guy Warren Kinsella, who was big in the 1990s? I don't know what he's doing now. Warren Kinsella, you know, the guy who does the Chinese cat jokes, that guy? Remember him? I don't know what he's doing now. If you're watching Warren, give us a call. Let us know what you're up to. I have no fear of Warren Kinsella. I don't want to shut Warren Kinsella up. Let's have at it, and let's, you know, may the best man win. But Warren Kinsella wants to shut you up, and he wants to shut me up. I have no fear of an argument. I have fear of state commissars with the power of the state behind them, but I have no fear of opinions.
I'd go further than that. I mean, Warren Kinsella, he's on the left-wing fringe. He's a liberal commentator for our channel. I'm not even not worried about him. I'm not worried about even people who are racist. I'm a Jew, but I'm not worried about a Holocaust denier or an anti-Semite, because unless he's going to take to violence or incite violence, or I am less worried about someone who's merely stupid or evil than a government so powerful that it can tell us what to think.
And you had the best line on that years ago, where you said that if you tell a guy he can't write an editorial, he can't write a book, he can't put a blog post up on the internet, then you leave him with the option they have in dictatorships, which is that all you can do is blow stuff up. And I think that is a very dangerous path to go. And I'm like you. Whatever one feels about racism or Islamophobia or sexism or homophobia, I have come to the conclusion that giving dim-witted state bureaucrats the power to regulate the citizenry into niceness is actually a far bigger threat.
You dim-witted is right. They remind me of the TSA, but for newspapers. We got to take a short break, folks. When we come back, the smallest chapter in the book is how to fix things. I'm going to focus on that for our last moments, because there is some glimmers of hope. That's next on The Source.
In the ruins of our civilization, they will dig up your bones and they will dig up my bones, and they will go bowling. They will go 10-pin bowling with them because they will be furious.
Ask me what it's like to get your best night's sleep every night.
Why not talk to someone who's sleeping on the most highly recommended bed in America?
Ask me about my Tempur-Pedic.
Ask me how fast I fall asleep.
Ask me about staying asleep.
Tempur-Pedic owners are more satisfied than owners of any traditional mattress brand.
Ask me why someone who's never had an ache or a pain is in love with this bed.
Tempur-Pedic, the most highly recommended bed in America.
Available at The Brick, Sears, Sleep Country Canada, and other fine retailers.
Have you ever wondered what you should do if you or a loved one is involved in a serious accident? Call me, Jeremy Diamond, and I will answer all your questions. Our team of trained professionals are on call to come to you during this time of need. We will visit you at home or the hospital and deal with the insurance companies directly on your behalf to ensure that you get all the assistance that you are entitled to. Call me for a free consultation at 1-800-567-HURT.
Why do Canada's most experienced travelers trust Medipac? Because Medipac covers most stable pre-existing medical conditions regardless of your age. Medipac travel insurance is affordable, and you can select the coverage and deductible that's right for your budget. Plus, when you have a medical emergency, your call is answered by Medipac's own team of doctors and nurses, not telemarketers. And Medipac is the only travel insurance program recommended exclusively by the Canadian Snowbird Association and the Royal Canadian Legion. A serious accident or illness while traveling can cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars. Why take that chance when you can get comprehensive and affordable protection from Medipac? Choosing the right travel insurance is simple. Call now and save up to 22% with our loyalty credit, claims-free, and early bird discounts. The Medipac early bird discount is only available until August 8th. Call 1-877-633-4722 or MedipacEarlybird.com. That's 1-877-Medipac.
Good morning, Canada. I'm Neelam Verma. Here's your first look at what's happening now.
With the morning's leading headlines, accurate weather, and a team to start your day off right.
What more do you want?
Welcome back. I'm Ezra Levant. We're talking with Mark Steyn, author of After America. It's a hell of a book. You know, it's scary, but it's funny at the same time, which is sort of weird. It's a terror comedy.
That's right. That's right. It's an Australian reviewer said it's a whole new genre, really, apocalyptic stand-up.
Right. There's a lot of one-liners in there that I'm probably going to try and steal, but I'm left with this terror. Now, in your last chapter, you come up with 9 words that all start with the letter D on how to fix it. I'm just going to rattle them off: decentralize, de-governmentalize, deregulate, demonopolize, decomplicate, decredentialize, disentitle, denormalize, and do. What are you getting at there?
Well, I don't want big government. Big government is remote government. It means you don't know who to call. That is why when you have big countries like Canada, if you're sitting in Yellowknife, it shouldn't be necessary to call somebody in Ottawa to figure out what's wrong with your highway. The best kind of government is small, local, and accountable government.
It's most distant and partisan is.
Yeah, and that's why I get terrified at people at this kind of world peace crowd who say, oh, wouldn't it be nice if we had a world government? I mean, do you honestly think a world government is likely to be more like Sweden or more like Syria? Yeah. And who do you call, what polling booth do you go to vote it out? That's what's so terrifying about the liberal urge always to push the operation of government up to the most universal aspect. I like towns with different highway policies. I like counties with different education policies. I like states with different tax policies. I like borders because borders give free people choices.
Now, how do you decredentialize? We joked about how Obama went to the best schools but learned nothing and did nothing. How do you decredentialize a society?
That is the biggest bubble, I think, in American life today. These absurd 6.5-year bachelor degrees where people do the
peace studies. I'm studying peace studies on the side.
Yeah, it's the sort of, it's not even like, in the 19th century, if you were the second son of a Grand Duke in Europe, that they didn't particularly have anything to do, you might go and do a sort of leisurely tri-national varsity. But you'd have been doing real subjects. You'd have been doing Latin, and you'd have been doing Greek. I mean, when you're just like lounging around contemplating your navel for 6.5 years, we need to get more people. As the Western world ages, we need to get more people into the workforce earlier. So keeping them at school until 28 is the opposite of what we should be doing.
How do you do that? How do you get them out of school? I mean, you know, I would think, well, stop subsidizing, but in America, they just borrow. They just borrow for their unsubsidized education. How do you get people to stop taking the BS degrees?
Well, I think in part that's to do with the realities of the market. I think people will not see any return on investment. America has over $1 trillion worth of college debt. In other words, it's getting on for, it's getting on for the size of the entire Canadian economy just in one stupid, unnecessary niche market of debt. Most of these people should not be at college. And we need to figure out ways to telescope education. That's critical.
I think that comes back to snobbery too.
Yeah.
Okay, now disentitle. We only have a couple minutes. How do you disentitle people without that? I mean, if you disentitle a labor union, a teachers union, well, that's a small, organized group that is very attentive, and they will fight like hell. Whereas the beneficiaries of disentitling are diffuse. They're not organized. By definition, they're working, so they can't politic. How do you disentitle 10 or 20 or 30% of the public?
Well, you say 10 or 20 or 30%. I think the danger is you get to the Greek stage where there are so many people who basically are on the statist teat that it is impossible. It becomes impossible to wean them off that. And I think the later you wait to postpone that, the worse it's going to be. But we are basically doing one of the most wicked things that any society has ever done. We are enjoying a level, a standard of living in the United States, in Canada, in Europe, that we are not willing to pay for. So in effect, we are taxing our children and our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren, and they will hate us for it. In the ruins of our civilization, they will dig up your bones and they will dig up my bones, and they will go bowling. They will go 10-pin bowling with them because they will be furious at what we have done to them.
You know, one statistic I remember from your book, you said for every 100 grandparents in Greece, there's only 42 grandchildren.
Exactly.
That's crazy.
Exactly. And so if you retire at 50, and you live, as they do in Greece, to 78, 79, those 42 grandchildren are burdened with 100 people who expect to spend 30 years as a Victoria Day weekend. And that is impossible.
Listen, we only have a final moments. Your last agenda item on your fix-it list was due. I don't want a general answer. I want an answer for me and for my friends and for politically motivated Canadians. What should we do in Canada today to stop? I mean, you say after America, but I don't think Canada's too far behind America.
No.
What can I do? What can we do to reverse this decline and fall?
Well, I think you fight these things at every level you can. It's not about in a way. It's about taking up the slogan of the environmental crowd: think globally, act locally. Every time some bumptious cop decides to shut down a 7-year-old kid's lemonade stand, you resist that there. You got in, looked fabulous on you, by the way, when you got into your kung fu outfit and you were doing kung fu fighting because some guy is doing karaoke in a pub and he's singing kung fu fighting, which was...
He was arrested in the Isle of Wight.
He was arrested in the Isle of Wight for a hate crime for singing kung fu fighting in a... Kung Fu Fighting, #1 record in Canada, #1 record in the United Kingdom, #1 all over the world, but a generation later, it's a hate crime. That's nuts, and we can't afford
Dire
it.
Straits, their song Money for Nothing was banned by the Broadcast Standards
Exactly,
Council.
and if the pansy disc jockeys of this nation had any guts, they'd be playing it, they'd be having Dire Straits weekends playing that song non-stop. Who are you? I mean, you are free men. You are the inheritors of 8 centuries of liberty, and you're letting some twerp bureaucrat tell you what lousy pop single you can play? You should be ashamed of yourselves. It's outrageous, that. And it starts at that level. It starts at the level of kung fu fighting. It starts at the lemonade stand. If you can't fix the lemonade stand police, if you can't fix the kung fu fighting police, you're certainly not going to be able to save the planet. Don't kid yourself on that.
Outstanding. Mark Steyn. You heard it there, folks. He's got an incredible new book. It's called After America, published by Regnery. You got to go out and buy this. You'll hate it, but you won't be able to put it down. You'll love it, and it will change your trajectory. And hopefully, it'll turn you into the kind of person who fights every incursion on your liberty, every taxation, every regulation. Mark Steyn, thank you very much for coming up to Montreal to spend an hour with us today.
My pleasure. Go get it.
All right. Hey folks, when we come back, I'll do a dramatic reading from my favorite passage of Mark Steyn's After America. What'll it be? Find out after the break.